Hi, this is Larry Levin, and welcome to another edition of Cop Talk and a very early Happy Hanukkah. Here with Bob Cohn and our producer, Aggie Gallagher. Bob, with the election season heating up, do you see any notable differences among the candidates, either Obama or the Republican candidates, in their likely approach to Israel, Iran, and the Middle East?
Well, the difference within the Republican field is Ron Paul versus all of the
Correct.
others vis-a-vis Israel.
Because he's pretty much of an isolationist.
He's an isolationist. But with respect to support for Israel, I'm reassured that the 7 other major candidates have all expressed very positive support for Israel. Some could say with some degree of credibility that they're a little bit too much in the Likud hardline camp, and that could box them in or come back to haunt them should one of them win the actual election.
Have you seen any of the rhetoric toned down at a congressional level?
I think within the Congress there's a real unanimity, Democrat, Republican, Liberal, Conservative, a solid basis of support for Israel. So it's particularly at the congressional level, I think that has healed considerably.
We've talked a lot about the Arab Spring being chock full of uncertainty, and that no one can really predict where the overall tone of the region is headed. Are you getting any more predictive at this point?
We have the results in Egypt, the first round of elections. 40% went to the Muslim Brotherhood, and something like 27% went to a group called the Salafis, who consider the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm not making this up, too moderate and too progressive.
Oh, no doubt, and they've been enemies, those
Exactly.
two parties have been, yeah.
The Egyptian military government is still in control. There was a small item in today's Wall Street Journal that they arrested one of those young entrepreneurial Google guys for questioning the government's decisions.
Yeah.
So that's unsettling, what's going on in Egypt right now.
But let me ask you a question. In Egypt, other than tourism, they don't have the oil. They don't have the natural resources. They have the sand. So my question to you is, from an economic development perspective, how far can we really expect to see them go and still have an economy that they can maintain in dealing with the rest of the world?
That will be a major challenge for them. However, Egypt has been historically, is now, even in this current chaotic situation, and will be for the foreseeable future, the most politically influential amongst the Arab states. So I think it will continue to play a key and pivotal role.
Let's talk about Israel, because there are some disturbing things going on internally.
Yes.
We're seeing Israelis turn on Israelis now with attacks against the IDF in the West Bank and the so-called price tag attacks. What's going on, and are we watching the erosion of civilized society here?
Well, I don't know that I'm ready to go quite that far. I give Netanyahu credit for indicating he was going to crack down. I don't see it, descending into a civil war, but it's pretty serious stuff.
It is, and as it gets more serious, can the Likud Labor Coalition stay put? I mean, it was fragile to begin with, but the more kind of civil stress there is, it seems to me, the more difficult it's going to be.
Or it could work the other way, because the most recent polls show that Netanyahu's approval ratings have risen from 32% when they had the original demonstrations in the streets to something like 49% now. He has called for early elections within Likud, and that could chart the political course in a different direction for Israel.
Let's talk about other approval ratings that have zoomed. President Obama's in Israel, 53% by the last poll. What do you make of that change?
Well, I think, he has some cred in that regard. When he was attacked by Romney in one of the debates by Mitt Romney for being an appeaser, he said, well, try this for appeasement. I got a copy of the New York Post. They had a cover that said, bam, Osama bin Laden, Anwar al-Awlaki, 13 or 14 major al-Qaeda figures taken down, tremendous cooperation in Egypt, and continued political support, especially at the United Nations. Obama's and Netanyahu's speeches were almost parallel to one another.
Yeah. Another thing that's happened, we've seen over this last year in terms of both public debate and legislation in Israel, cutbacks on free speech rights to non-governmental organizations. Are you worried about the curtailment on civil liberties?
I'm very worried about that, because Israel has been uniquely democratic. And even some more conservative voices in Israel from the earlier days of Zionism in Israel have spoken out vehemently opposed to these restrictions on free speech or various non-governmental organizations whose ideology we may not necessarily support, but they have an absolute perfect right to and should to operate within Israel.
Israelis often take the tack that the world just has to deal with them, no matter who they are and whatever they do. But I do think they have to be aware of how they're perceived in the world, and especially when you're trying to be perceived as a bastion of democracy and civil rights in an era where the whole region is in strife. I think it becomes even more important to bend over backwards to show that you reflect the values of democracy.
Well, if they are indeed to be a light unto the nations, and I believe that is part of their current mission as well as
Yeah.
the ancient mission, then they absolutely must be gold to pass for silver, is the expression.
Now, the Obama administration and Leon Panetta decreed the end of the war on Iraq. Is it the end, or does it have any special or particular significance going forward for Jews or Israelis?
Well, I was personally very relieved to see our soldiers coming home in time for the Hanukkah, Christmas holidays. I hated seeing any remains being brought back in black draped caskets. I would have been more comfortable had there been some kind of a residual force left behind. It might have been a little bit better in terms of the short-term security for Iraq. I'm concerned about growing influence by Iran, but I am very relieved, as most Americans certainly are, that the combat is ending in Iraq.
That does it for Cobb Talk. We'll see you next time. Take care.